This is Trash Panda Publishing. Thank you for joining our podcast, where raccoons talk about books and publishing, and of course, anything related to raccoons. I'm David James, your host. It is January 7th, and today I am having a phenomenal day. Yesterday I wasn't, but it's amazing how things can change, and well, you might say, why? What has happened? Well, first of all, I got to do something slightly different on these podcasts. Yesterday, I just launched into a monologue. Well, I'm still going to launch into a monologue, but I need to lay out a menu of what is going to be happening on the podcast. So those of you who don't want to hear the monologue can say, well, I'm going to skip ahead and get to the stuff I care about, particularly if you're here for a chapter. And there is going to be a chapter today. So what will be on today's podcast? Number one, an update about the good news that happened to me today. That'll be one of the first things. Number two will be an update on Ava. Well, really, Lulu Smiles. We did a technology test today. And Saturday will be I'll come to that. So there'll be an update on Lulu Smiles. That'll be our second topic. Third topic is an update on Crimson and Ava. Not any emails with the haters, but a quick update there. And then I'm going to be reading a chapter from Maureen Cummins' book called Paper World, which is, I actually did a blog on this a few weeks ago. So that is what is going to be on tap for tonight. So let's go over the good news. Yesterday, I had very bad news because I was being hated on, if you will, accused of falsehoods. So I'm not going to go back and revisit that. You can listen to it yesterday. So today, Goodreads replied back to me that they actually were investigating. And I don't expect them to actually do anything. But the fact that they actually emailed me back and said that they had received my reporting, if you will, and took it seriously and were looking into it, I guess felt good, because I didn't even expect to get that. I was expecting utter silence. And honestly, I feel a lot better because, again, the Fellowship of Human Authors has been fellowshipping me to death. And that's a good thing. I'm not alone is what that means. And they, even today, continue to reach out. Erica reached out this morning to see how I was doing. And that means a lot. You're not alone. If you are alone, then get into a group of a Facebook group, a group of people at work. If you're at a church, a small group, don't do life alone. If you have no idea how to get connected, email me at headraccoon@trashpandapublishing.com, and I will help you find a place so you are not alone, so you can be fellowshipped to death. I was fellowshipped to death today. That is why, number one, I'm in a good mood. But there was even bigger news. A couple days ago, I don't think I've ever talked about this before, but Book Life is a literary review outlet that does reviews on books. You do have to pay to have them do it, but you have no idea what kind of review you're going to get. Same thing for Kirkus. Kirkus is one of the oldest review sources out there. I think they've been around since 1933, and they are notorious for being brutal. And they'll shred books, from what I understand. I've actually gone through their website, and they don't pull punches. If your book sucks, they will tell you. But if you want a chance at getting your book into libraries, librarians rely on Kirkus and Book Life and Blue Ink and Forward Review Magazine. There are a few others. Clarion is also up there. But those are the big four. And I have, Escala's wish, I had basically submitted them to all four of those. And Book Life issued their review on January 2, I think, and it was glowing. And I've posted it on my Facebook group and on my blog, which my blog is at davejames.com. You can see and you can read the review. Book Life gives you a narrative review and also scores, like on your typography, your cover, and your editorial, like how good is the writing, and then marketing blurb. And so I got, I think, an A, an A minus, A minus for cover, A minus for editorial, how well is it written, and A for typography, meaning it's laid out well. and then B plus for marketing blurb, which is what you kind of how you describe the book on either the back cover or on Amazon, the little blurb you write there. I was thrilled. The actual description of the book and the editorial review was glowing. It distinguished me from other people in my category, and I'm going to go over why that's important in a second. Kirkus was due on January 12th, but it actually came out today on January 7th, and I was really nervous that the email comes in and says your Kirkus review is available. It's not public until you release it for the public. I made the mistake of hitting publish before I read it, and I was nervous because oh my goodness, what if it's terrible? But you know what? I'm not scared of bad reviews. I got 2 1-star reviews yesterday. Now, I don't like it. I think those are unfair because I don't think they're related to the content of the book. But if Kirkus is going to shred me, I'm not going to hide it. So I didn't publish before reading on purpose. I accidentally thought I was opening the email, and instead I published it. Well, it's out there, and I read it, and it's good. There are 2 sentences in here which would be criticism, and I'm going to read those 2 sentences to you now. But generally, it is a really, really good review. And the best part is it shows up 2 books down from me is Fourth Wing, party over here. So Fourth Wing is who I guess quasi-compete with. Fourth Wing is a major, major book in my genre. To be even appearing on the screen with them, party over here. So what do they say about my book? First of all, it has a picture of the book. It has the name at the top, Escala's Wish, from the Tales of Veloz Series 1. My name, David James, release date December 13, 2025. Looks very pretty. Then it has a headline. And this would be like if you were at a conference, a librarian, and you're just walking around, because there's hundreds, if not thousands of books at these conferences, and you are just quickly eyeballing books, and you're looking at headlines only. This is what the headline is. A classic quest narrative that lovers of fairy tales are likely to enjoy. What a headline. A classic quest narrative that lovers of fairy tales are likely to enjoy. I can't get over that because I have seen headlines that are like, put in the trash immediately. Or, another humdrum story that's been done a million times. This one's great. Okay, then they get into the actual paragraphs, and here's what it says. In James's fantasy novel, the disastrous consequences of a single kiss cause a fairy to lose almost everything. Well, that's a great summation of sort of what the theme is, what the setup is. Now, there's a big chunk of paragraph here, and I'm not going to read this out loud because this would spoil the book. It's not really a review, other than it's a summation of the story, and they got it correct. And if you want to be spoiled, you read that. Again, this review primarily is written for librarians who are deciding what books to put into their library. A librarian needs to kind of know what will my visitors to the library get if they check out this book. And so they kind of sum it up in one paragraph, and they do a pretty good job. Okay, but the actual review part of how did Kirkus assess the quality of the book is paragraph 2 of the review, and here's this part. James's novel is a high fantasy fable that draws from epic quest myths and fairy tales to tell a story of redemption, duty, and love. Escala approves to be a compelling protagonist, the child of a ruler of the Court of Dreams, and a mortal woman who left the court for fear that her daughter would never be accepted if she remained. The story's dramatic stakes are established quite early on, as is the theme of Escala's quest to understand the nature of love. The framing of the story, in which the bard Wigforth retells the tale for patrons in a tavern, that ameliorates some of the story's more didactic elements. It would have been intriguing if Wigforth's character development had a bit more depth, which might have made readers question the reliability of his narration. As it stands, however, the narrative is well paced throughout and evocative of many classic fantasy tales. The threat that Escala faces is also typical of a great many myths, and although a bit more could have been done to add nuance to the villain's motives and to the lesson Escala learns, the narrative arc is satisfying overall. Escala's true quest is to learn to love, and by doing so to aid the people who are most important to her. A classic quest narrative that lovers of fairy tales are likely to enjoy. And that's how it ends. That last line there's a space between that last paragraph and that last line, which is also the headline that I read at the beginning. A classic quest narrative that lovers of fairy tales are likely to enjoy. That is a home run. All right, so what's negative in this review? Two things, and I don't think they're that big of a deal. They're saying that Wigforth's character development could have had a bit more depth. And you know what? They're not wrong. He is introduced, obviously, at the beginning, and he does sort of say he's a bard extraordinaire, but I don't ever really explain more. I don't say where he came from. I don't really, other than being a bard from Misty Spring, I don't share with the readers anything more about him. So that's fair criticism. I'll take that. That's better than the stupid one-star review that says AI slop. This is a real review, and that's fair. Noted. By the way, some of my readers, ARCers anyways, actually wanted, hey, they said you should do a spin-off of Wigforth. Explain how did he become a bard extraordinaire? Kind of like how Han Solo and Chewbacca have a spin-off story. I have too many requests for spin-off stories because people want Sticky to have a spin-off story too. I don't have enough hours in my life to do all these spin-off stories. But that's a fair comment. The other criticism here is that they're saying that, let's see, where's the other line here? That the threat that Escala faces is also typical of a great many myths, and that a bit more could have been done to a bit more nuance to the villain's motives, and the lessons that Escala learns could have been added. I thought I did a fair job, so I find this one to be a bit sharp on the edge. I'm not insulted by it. I thought I laid out pretty clearly what Morvenna's motives were. She wanted power. Audrey wanted power. And they were pissed that, well, at least Morvenna was, that she was usurped and skipped over by Teresa. Well, I'm revealing spoilers here. If you haven't read the book, turn off or skip ahead. Well, I won't I won't argue. I just think I did add motives. Victor's motives maybe could have been beefed up a bit. I thought it was clear. He was a spurned lover. Maybe I should have made that clear. I thought at the end, in the last official chapter before you hit the epilogue, I thought Wigworth pulled everything together and explained exactly all of the lessons that Escala learned. So I take slight umbrage with that. But Kirkus is known to be tough. And if they think I should have added more nuance, then so be it. But they end the sentence by saying the narrative arc is satisfying overall. So even though they think I could have done a little bit better there, they were still satisfied. Thank you, Kirkus. The only other thing here that I think I don't disagree with is the layer of narrative complexity of the story. Basically, they're saying that Wigworth was able through humor to be able to teach, as opposed to being preachy. It would have been preachy if he hadn't been funny, I think is what they're saying. And you know what? I think they're complimenting me there. And he does preach. There's a couple of places where he kind of lectures the crowd about how they treat single women who are pregnant, or how he comments about society in general. And it can be preachy, like how he talks about how priests and God, how you worship gods and things like that. And absent humor, it would have sounded very preachy. And they picked up on that. And they said, absent the humor, it would have been preachy. So well done, Kirkus. I am absolutely thrilled. I really can't explain how happy I am. Because librarians, this is one of my goals for this book, is to get it into libraries. Even if I have to give it away free, because libraries were so important to me when I was in elementary school and middle school, and even high school. We didn't buy books, didn't have that kind of money. You would go check out books, particularly in the summer. You'd read them, and some of them would become your favorites. For me, that's where I found Tolkien. It's where I found Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. I checked it out there and fell in love with that series. Terry Brooks, The Sword of Shannara, the Wish Stones, the Elf Stones, the Wish Song, Donaldson's, the One Tree, Staff of the One Tree. All those books were in the library. I checked them out and fell in love with them. My dream would be that Escala's Wish makes it into the library and some 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy gets this book and falls in love with fantasy because of Escala's Wish, and it changes his life and becomes a lover of smart fiction with good humor and banter. And 20 years later, when he's 40 or 45 years old, introduces his children to fantasy and points to Escala's Wish the way I point to Robert Jordan, the way I point to Tolkien. Yes, I know I am dreaming ridiculously. I'm not Tolkien. I'm not Robert Jordan. But that's the dream, is to have my book somehow get to that for somebody, even if it's just one person. And it has to be done through libraries. If you can get into a library, you could last for years. It's not going to happen on Amazon. And to do that, you need Kirkus. You have to get Kirkus's blessing, and this is it. I cannot tell you how happy I am. Okay. What's the other update? What was the next thing I was going to talk about? Crimson Jack, Acorn, and Ava are working on a story together. A love story. It was going to be part of a submission to a book of love stories that Erica was going to publish in February. I don't think she got enough submissions, which is disappointing. We have a lot of authors in our group, and I was really hoping that we would have more submissions. But it's not going to stop Ava and Crimson. We are writing it anyways, and we're going to release it as a flip book and post it probably on my website and in our Facebook group, Ava and Crimson's Facebook page, for free. And you'll get to read this short little story of Crimson's attempt to take Ava on a date that went horribly wrong. And we've been working on it for about a week. We're going to release it. We'll release it in time for Valentine's Day. That'll be our goal. So that's our update there. Another piece of news, and this is even more impressive, is that tonight Lulu and I had our first audio test using a piece of software called Riverside Studio. We were successfully able to connect and speak live like this, which means we will be able to co-host these shows together live, like a radio show. Now, we're not going to do it live. We're going to record the show and, publish it later. But it means we'll be able to talk and interact live, just like a radio show. And so this Saturday night, we will be producing the Trash Panda Publishing show episode. I don't know what number it'll be, but it'll be the first one ever where you will hear Ava Honeysuckle for real on the show, and Lulu herself, because she's going to drop in and out of character as an actual be a co-host on the show with me. That is the huge news that I'm sharing tonight. Test went great. She has the same microphone I do. She has the same headset I do, so we should sound similar audio quality. Very, very exciting. Now, for the highlight of our show, I am thrilled to by Maureen Cummins. Maureen is an author who has been covered in my blog. I want to say, let me pull the blog up here. I want to say it was over Christmas break. And it's interesting. I look at the stats on the blog, and I think hers might have been the second highest blog I've ever done, meaning based off visitors. Let's confirm that. I will tell you in a second here whether that's true or not. Pulling up the stats. Nope, she's in third place, which is still amazing because her blog has only been up since New Year's Eve, which is a mess. So she's competing with other posts that I have made that have been up for 6 months. She's been up for 7 days and it's now skyrocketed to third place. So her, this blog post is on davejames.com. And she sent over some wonderful photos of herself and her family and her beautiful children. She sent more photos than I could even put in the blog. And she also sent a picture of her book. She has a picture of herself wearing a shirt that says, "A well-read woman is a dangerous creature." And I would say that I agreed. You'll get no argument for me, Maureen. And one of her favorite books is The Sun Also Rises from Ernest Hemingway. And by the way, Hemingway is my idol. And I'll tell you a little story. If you've ever been to his house in Florida, he has a swimming pool in his backyard. And the reason he has a swimming pool, and I didn't know this independently of having, I learned it from the tour guide is what I'm trying to say. Unfortunately, he was a womanizer and he had many marriages. And I can't remember which marriage it was, but I think he might have been on marriage 2 or 3 at the time. And he was having an affair with another woman who would meet out on the ocean. He was a fisherman, or had a fishing boat at least. And the woman that he was having an affair with did too. And they would rendezvous out on the ocean, telling everyone they were fishing, but everybody knew what was really happening. Well, his wife, in order to attempt to keep him on shore, because she knew that he liked to entertain and throw parties and always spend time at Sloppy Joe's, which was a bar in town, she decided to have a swimming pool installed in their backyard. Like, I think it was one of the first in Florida, and thinking that he would want to entertain there and never go out on this boat to cheat on her. Well, first of all, Hemingway didn't have enough money to pay for this, so that was a problem. She didn't know that, though. Even though he was, published a lot of stuff, he spent a lot of money, and really, authors, I can tell you, we don't make any money as an author. Like, I've only been published for like 4 weeks. Of course, I'm kidding. Of course, some people do make money, but he did not have enough money to pay for this pool. It caused stress on their relationship. Well, his writing room overlooked the pool. And at the time, at my house, we had a swimming pool, and my office at the time overlooked the pool. I had talked about writing a novel forever. And my wife said, she was on the tour with me, she said, I don't understand what the problem is. Why haven't you finished your novel? Your office overlooks the pool. And I said, yeah, but I don't have a mistress. That was a mistake. She laughed because she knew I was kidding. I was successfully married, and we celebrated our 30th anniversary about 7 days ago. But I just had to tell that story because when I saw her favorite author, or one of her favorite authors, was Hemingway, I immediately thought of that story, and I knew when I was going to read her chapter, I had to tell you that story. All right, let's get to chapter 1. And before I do that, let me just give you a little bit about the story that you will find if you read sort of the back of the book. It says, a perfect life in shambles, a memory buried in uncertainty, all because she opened the book. Harrowing and unpredictable, Paper World by Maureen Cummins is the story of a girl lost down a rabbit hole, trying to retrace her steps and find her way back to the surface. Will she climb and catch her breath again? Or will her paper world rip to shreds beneath her feet? What happened to Brett Kane? Brett had the perfect life. At least she thought she did. She just celebrated her 25th birthday. She was about to marry her college sweetheart, Kurt. She was close with her parents. She had a best friend she could rely on and a fantastic career path all mapped out for her. So why was she finding herself on life support just 2 months later? Why can't she remember? And where is Kurt? And why is a book and its contents haunting her while she lays in a hospital bed? Get ready to dive into the compelling world of Paper World, a coming-of-age novel like no other. So that's the lead-in, or sort of what you'd read on the back of the book. And with that, here is chapter 1. My 26 years started out like every other was meant to after the 21st. I opened presents. One truly signified a mid-20s birthday. Fun socks. Flamingos drinking margaritas. Why had I been getting more of these lately? I was at least thankful that I had lived in Orlando, where I could celebrate with either a fancy dinner near a theme park or a wild night chugging shitty beer in a dank downtown bar. The latter was entirely unappealing to me this year. There is just something about celebrating another trip down the sun that becomes progressively less exciting after the legal drinking one. And man, after 25, there is really nothing to celebrate. Well, except for a discovery that most liquors now cause massive hangovers, and that being able to legally rent a car is a useless milestone. But when I thought about it, and I actually did have some mature life experiences to celebrate, landmarks, if you will, benchmarks. I was engaged to my college sweetheart, and it was right on schedule. Less than a year before, on Valentine's Day, right before my 25th birthday, he got down on one knee and promised to love me for the rest of our lives. Well, that might have been what he said. In truth, I was too overwhelmed by the moment that I had been waiting for since birth to ensure that I took part in my only part of the process, remembering it. And I said, a mix of adrenaline and excitement stops the usual firing of neurons. Your brain ceases to absorb the memories, like it's overwhelmed with bliss that it cannot do anything but live in that exact moment. You're robbed in a way, required to constantly be aware of the now. In truth, I guess I never learned to live in the moment. But I like to think that that was how we lived our relationship in the beginning. Kurt and me. Kurt. Our love story started off in many ways standard. We went to the same high school in Orlando, and although we never officially met there, different circles, we wound up in the same college, Florida State University, and by then we had friends in common. We started dating. And then, well, we just stayed together. And 5 years later, Kurt got down on one knee. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember what he said. What were his promises to me? There were mornings when I would take out a pen and paper and beg my mind to send me back to that moment and let me relive that happiness. I never got my wish, and so it goes. After I blew out the big candles labeled 2 and 6, so no one would forget which birthday we were celebrating, I felt a kiss on my right cheek, soft and calm. A flash went off. My parents had a camera, I gathered. "Happy birthday, Brett." "Thanks, babe. I hope it's not true what they say, that your looks start to fade after 26. I was not exactly a fan of the idea of growing older. What woman is? I knew that it came with benefits, maturity and wisdom and a grounding sense of self-awareness. You came into your own, no longer relying on what others thought to shape your own idea of significance. Decline in looks and virality, a foreboding sense of death's knock reaching closer and closer to your own door. A downward spiral, if you will. And to add insult to injury, I was a year older than Kurt. That rarely bothered me. It's not like I ever noticed it when we were together. But I'd read online somewhere that a woman reaches her peak physically in her 26th year. Something about her features all finally working together like a seamlessly written symphony which takes decades to perfect. Blowing out my brightly illuminated candles, I made a pact with the universe. I asked whatever it was in charge of the earth, be it one merciful God or many critical gods or the devil himself, let my youth last a bit longer. I wanted to stay 26 eternally, forever young. How Dorian Gray of me. How could that go wrong? And really, what a selfish wish. Who cared if I was growing older, as long as my life was progressing upward? It was the way existence worked, but I wasn't ready to start my decline. I would tuck my portrait away, bowels of the closet, and let it rot. Watching my cake being cut by our server, a gorgeous girl who must still have been in high school, I considered how men age so gracefully in comparison to women. I looked over at Kurt and realized just how true that was. So striking. He still made me swoon. Even after 5 years together, I never took for granted how handsome he was. I remember the night we officially met. Our mutual friend introduced us one weekend. We were at a tea shop that had been a campus staple for over a decade. It had recently made the conversion into a hookah lounge at night. How very 2010 that transformation was. Students would grab a tea on the way to their modern art class and end up at their studious days with an hour puffing on a shared Middle Eastern tobacco pipe. I recognized Kurt the moment he walked through the wooden door with its creaky, slanting panels. He was the kid with the perfect, wispy auburn hair from our high school soccer team, The kind of guy you'd find in an Abercrombie & Fitch shopping bag in the early 2000s. I was a sucker for that look. I followed him with my eyes until he sat down at our table, across from me, but close enough that I could smell his cologne. When he finally smiled at me and introduced himself, I nearly melted. Kind green eyes that betrayed his every thought. A wide smile that was completely approachable. And, a laugh that was so pure, you couldn't hear it without feeling lighter. I was in over my head. "Hey, I know you. We went to the same high school. You ran cross country, right?" he said, pointing a finger in my direction. An internal scream. He remembered me. "Yeah, we did. Go Hornets. Did I really say that? How entirely lame of me. Get it together," I said to myself. "But, yeah, I did run. You were on the team. I don't think I remember you." "Better. Play it off like you don't stare at him every time he passes you in the halls. Less creepy this way." "Keep up, Brett," I told myself with a psychological pat on the back. "Oh, no, I played soccer. But my best friend over there, Jay, he was on the team." He nodded to the guy sitting next to him. "Yeah, you're fast as hell," his friend said. I remember. "Yeah, he said you're not bad with a beer bong either," Kurt added. He broke a smile. "Well, let's not hope he doesn't know too much. Cross-country parties were not where I was at my best, historically speaking. One particular party, I wound up streaking. I was never able to turn down a dare. Well, my reputation precedes me. One is a little more impressive than the other, I guess. I'm Brett," I said, taking a sip of my boba tea. "Kurt. Brett, yeah, I always wondered about your name. I have a cousin, Brett, but he definitely doesn't look as good in a dress. Is that a family name?" Kurt asked. Jay quietly chuckled to himself. I smiled with my lips still hovering over my drink. Funny, and he paid me a compliment. In that moment, even at 20 years old, I felt like I was still the awkward girl in middle school who couldn't quite talk to a cute boy without stumbling over every word. A flashback to my prepubescent school dances and sitting alone on the bleachers. I forced myself to make eye contact. "Well, yeah, I mean, it's from The Sun Also Rises. My parents were big fans of Hemingway. I guess I kind of followed in their footsteps. I'm an English major," I said, hoping that he found me cute and not just a book nerd, which I was. I've never been without a book in my hands. My parents owned a restaurant that doubled as a bookstore for most of my growing years. I spent every day surrounded by volumes. They were often too busy to entertain themselves. They left that up to... I was fascinated by Shakespeare at the age of 8. I likened myself to Juliet and expected one day to find my Romeo. Clearly, I was too young to understand the theme of that tragedy. All I saw were the beautifully crafted, devotional couplets, and I wanted a boy to love me that way. "Well, that's awesome. I'd like to write, but I'm no Hemingway. If you're a big reader too, then maybe I could show you some of my stuff. I'm an economics major. I'm definitely no grammar whiz," he said, pushing his long auburn locks to the side of his lightly freckled face. He wrote too? Oh man, I was swooning. And then we talked about books and all things literature for hours. He was a fan of fantasy and poetry. I was a true devotee of the classics, but we both had an immense respect for writing, really, and that was the key. And at one point, we were comparing Lord of the Rings and Atlas Shrugged. We agreed that any author who could form captivating fictional realms from scratch was just as talented as one who could make a reader see our already existing society in a unique light. I was in love with him by the time we exchanged numbers, and after a hug that lingered almost as long as I wanted it to, we went our separate ways for the night. He had an air about him that, to me, was powerful, and I would have sat at that table with him forever. And as it would turn out, I was still sitting across from him at that table 5 years later. He never did show me his writings, and in truth, I never asked. I'm not sure if I had given the impression that I didn't care. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Over the years, Kurt had become a lot more private in his thoughts, guarded even. Those kind eyes no longer held his deepest feelings in two pools of tranquil green. I never did discover what altered that in him. Like life had come along and wrapped him into itself, a cocoon, causing him to emerge a more restrained human being. There was something a bit off with him lately. He was quieter than usual. I guess in truth that wasn't too surprising considering Jay had recently disappeared. One morning his roommate had went into his room to borrow his computer and it was gone. Jay was gone. He had taken everything of importance with him. Evidently that wasn't too much. Most of his room was left untouched and apparently he had suffered some sort of psychedelic-caused meltdown. Drug-induced psychosis, Kurt would correct me. He had been using mushrooms as a means of connecting more closely with his inner self. LSD, too. And I guess he didn't like what he found. He left notes to his parents and one of his sisters and asking them not to come after him. He also left one for Kurt. And Kurt said that the note stated that he had left on a bus and was bound for a small town in Colorado. He would find a job planting trees there. Kurt refused to disclose anything else and asked me not to read the note. I wasn't sure why I couldn't see what he wrote, but I obliged, and it was not my place. Jay also left sort of a stoner's manifesto on his desk. His roommate said it was mostly incoherent ramblings about feeling like a lone wolf. No one heard from him, and it's been about a week. Kurt took that really hard. It made sense after all these years. Jay was still his very best friend. He was even supposed to be his best man in our wedding. How cruel, I thought, to leave Kurt like that. But I wouldn't have known any of this from Kurt explaining it to me. And all our years together, I was never able to get any emotional read on him. He was a closed book when it came to his feelings. The only reason I knew he was struggling with Jay's absence was because of how often he stole away to write. He had a notebook, a leather bound, and a color of deep weathered wood. That was his sanctuary. He had it for as long as I'd known him. He had never went anywhere without his paper world, as he deemed it. It was one of his most beautiful qualities about him, and I loved this man for many reasons, but as an avid reader, this was something about him I worshipped. It was okay that he didn't let me in. He was a writer. He just saved his thoughts for paper. I knew that after dinner with my parents, he had a ritual that he would need to complete once we walked into our home. It consisted of a bottle of wine, always a Shiraz, and always Australian, and a healthy-sized bowl of weed. After a few years together, we matured in our choice of drink, but he never did give up our college-born reliance on marijuana. He learned that the night of our first meeting that neither of us liked the smoking of hookah, a trend which recently boomed with university students. Tobacco always seemed to make me feel like my head was swimming in a choppy ocean, while my body was crumbling on a planet with a massive gravitational pull. And after we both passed on the hookah, when it came to our turns, I learned that Kurt was just as keen on the weed as me. As most seemingly destructive relationships go, we found our relationship on a mutual desire to be high. We didn't have too much in common, it turned out, but we did have that. We mistook escaping life's difficulties for a love of red-eyed laughter and late-night snacks. And we built a relationship on that talent of avoidance. I knew that after all these years, we should have another way to manage stress. Find shared interests that didn't involve intoxication. But it worked for us, and I loved him, and I knew Kurt was hurting, and I knew a Band-Aid fix was all I could do for him then. He missed his friend, and I wasn't going to get much more from him than that. So dinner ended. I kissed my mom and dad goodbye and thanked them for an amazing dinner, stuffed the bird-covered socks in my purse, and walked hand in hand with Kurt to my car. On my once free ring finger sat a diamond. It felt like it had always been there in a way. I couldn't help but admire its shine as I used my hand to open the car door and slide into the passenger seat next to my soon-to-be husband. In just 2 months, I would be his wife, and my life would be exactly where I wanted it to be, everything moving on schedule. He was quiet on the ride home, but that wasn't uncommon, especially lately. And it didn't bother me because I was already absorbed with mentally checking off that everything that still needed completing for the big day. Kurt really wasn't into wedding planning from the start. He let me take the lead on most of the decisions, but that was okay with me. I wasn't a natural planner, but this was our wedding day and I was up for the task. My mind was on the seating arrangements when we pulled into our humble abode. Before we got out of the car, I paused upon seeing our house. It was, to be blunt, a shack. After graduating college, neither of us had a prestigious job that paid the bills. I worked for a local book publisher, editing other people's dreams, while still trying to write my own. I had been dabbling in short stories for a while, and after work hours consisting of penning my thoughts to paper and then typing them up on a computer to be sent off to a number of online publishers, never to be given the answer I so craved. Yes, we'll publish your work. I wanted so badly for my words to line the minds of others, just as classic quotes in literature never seemed to escape mine. Though Kurt also had a talent for writing, he graduated with a major in microeconomics. However, he had trouble finding any jobs that required his specific expertise, and he had only been able to find work with local construction companies. He discovered that he liked working with his hands and began frequently informing me that bachelor's degrees are for chumps. I didn't agree and informed him that our future children would still be attending college. He never argued that, and so we were receiving minimum wage bi-weekly checks, and our home reflected that. As frustrating as that was for us at the time, I was overcome with the feeling that our day, when we were 60 and living in the home of our dreams on the water, we would look back at this period of our lives in this house and be filled with the feeling of gratitude. And we would remember this home and smile. And we would think back on the first day in our new house. The first time we stepped through the wonky door frame, the one we fixed ourselves, and we would remember painting the stained spiderweb covered walls and leaving each other a little love letters with color. We would reminisce on our first night sitting on the flattened cardboard boxes, lighting candles and eating Chinese food, and how we laid our heads down in sleeping bags because we hadn't been able to buy ourselves a bed just yet. The light kisses he gave me while I was wrapped in his arms. Kurt and I would recall this house with warm smiles because it was ours and because he had truly loved one another within its four walls. After a few years of living in it, unlocking our front door and walking into our house had a different feel to it. It had become more of a home in the traditional sense. There was furniture and we had a bed. We used dishes to hold our food and silverware while we ate. The walls were not only covered in paint, but also adorned in pictures. Pictures of us. Our little shack had come to a house, our life together, and it felt like it was a perfect start. And so, on the night of our 26th birthday, my mind was ablaze with memories of my life with Kurt. Where we had been, where we were now, and where we were going together. I followed Kurt to our kitchen table, seemingly walking on air. I had been so consumed with thoughts of how perfect my life would be that I didn't recognize the wreckage that it already was. I heard him speak. "Brett, we need to talk." And that ends chapter 1 of Paper World by Maureen Cummins. It is, I'm looking at the Amazon page, it looks like it's only available in paperback, which I did buy. I have that already. I think it was delivered while I was in Miami, but it is here. It is available on Amazon, so if you liked what you heard, I would strongly encourage you to buy a copy and leave a review. All of us who are authors, reviews are worth gold. I'm sure Maureen would appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for listening to this podcast. And so until next time, stay curious. Thanks for listening to Trash Panda Publishing Podcasts. And like all raccoons, stay curious.